皆様こんばんは。
Good evening, everybody. We will now begin the first session of webinar series Beyond Barriers, titled Invisible Barriers We Face in Our Daily Lives. So tonight, the interpreters who will helping us are Nobuko Tsutsui and Mika Sho. And our sign language interpreters are Yukio Morimoto and Mayumi Higuchi. And allow us to ask you once again, please kindly mute the video and microphone at your ends. Now let me introduce Life's project hosted by Hands on Tokyo, a specified nonprofit corporation. The mission of Life's project is to create an inclusive society where the individuality of each person shines and everyone is empowered to work, eat, and laugh together. This is the fifth time we are holding the annual project event, which has been held since 2017. This year, 5 projects have already kicked off, and all the projects will culminate with the Lives Tokyo event to be held on September 26th this year. Among all the projects, Lives University Project will provide a setting for not only the students with or without disability, but also students who have diverse personalities, individualities, to discuss and talk to each other as we host 3 webinars. With better communication, we believe we can encourage students to support each other and the community to enhance their college experience. Without further ado, let us start the event. Tonight, Tenta Okada myself and Rina Miyoshi myself will serve as the MC of the event. Thank you again for joining us. So, allow me to self-introduce myself. My name is Tenta Okada, and currently I am studying management at the Graduate School of Meiji University. What I do right now is I operate food trucks and engage in and sell lunches, box lunches, and in other prefectures, I grow plants to dye fabrics in blue, and together with the persons with disability. I also market and sell products produced at welfare facilities online. In the future, I hope to solve challenges of PWD and farmers through agricultural welfare collaboration, solve challenges of people with disabilities. Now I hand over to you, Ms. Rina. So my name is Rina Miyoshi. I am a sophomore at the International Christian University, and I am visually handicapped, and my both eyes have lost sight. What I am engaged now is I serve as the band leader for a cappella singing club at ICU. I am visually impaired, but I enjoy practicing for the online live performance as I help with each other. And I try to give feedback, mutual feedback among the members, and I try to listen to the opinions of other members as I proceed with the meetings. What I would like to challenge in the future is I want to expand my horizon and be able to feel that I too is a full-fledged member of the society as I carry on with my life. It's a pleasure to meet you all today. Thank you, Rina. So tonight we have a guest speaker, Ms. Uyanga is here.
Our guest speaker tonight, Miss Uyanga Erdenebold. So, Uyanga-san, will you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Thank you, Tenta and Rina. I'm going to try a little bit of Japanese here. Minasan wa
Thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for joining us tonight. And I am originally from Mongolia, and
that's the extent of my Japanese, I'm afraid. So from now on, let's switch to English in the interest of time. I am extremely happy to be invited to serve as the first speaker for this session. And before we start our session, I would also like to say that I see my role here today as a discussion facilitator, right? I want to throw out ideas and my personal observations so that we can have a larger discussion as a group together. So I'm really looking forward to exchange of ideas and what we can learn from each other. Now, having said that, as for my introduction, as I said, I'm originally from Mongolia. I was born and raised in Mongolia, and I have an eye condition called retinitis pigmentosa, which is a genetic condition that makes me lose my sight gradually. So I started college probably by the age of 19 or 20. I lost most of my vision in both eyes. And so I studied in the US, I studied in Mongolia, and I worked at the US Embassy in Mongolia. That's where I met my husband. And we got married. And now my husband works at the US Embassy in Japan as a diplomat. And we have a little boy called Henry, who's 4 years old. And I also have a guide dog called Danaway, who's lying under the table right now. And next Monday is her 5th birthday. So that's all I have to say for my introduction. So I'm really looking forward to talking with all of you today.
Thank you for introducing yourself to us. Uyanga-san, I know you are going to talk about the barriers we face every day. So what is a barrier and how does it relate to ability and disability?
Thank you, Rina-san. So in my opinion, simply put, barrier is lack of access. And I think the correlation between barrier and ability or disability is an important one. Barrier creates lack of access, and lack of access creates or results in reduction of ability, which in turn could create disability. So from this perspective, we can argue that disability is not so much an inherent inability. It might actually be simply lack of access, right? So disability does not create barrier, but it's the lack of access that might cause disability. And Pablo Picasso once said that there's only one way to look at things until someone shows us that there is a different way to look at those things. And so perception is very important in understanding or defining barrier or disability. Because just like many things in life, disability can be just a matter of perception. So let's do kind of a thought experiment here. What if I was to tell you that as a blind person, I have a better advantage, or I enjoy watching movies better than sighted people? Is seeing the only way to watch a movie? Because what if I argue that from my perspective as a blind person, sighted people are only limited to what they see on the screen. So if you see an actor playing a character in a movie, you are only limited to the image of that character, right, as a sighted person. But as a blind person, I can create any image. I have the liberty to be creative in my head, to create that character's image or in any way I want. So, I could argue that because of the lack of the visuals, I'm not distracted. And because of that, maybe I have more deeper impression of the movie. Maybe the sounds and the words and the music leave deeper impression on me. And maybe I enjoy the movie as a whole better if I could see it, rather than if I could see it. Now, on the other hand, imagine if you were reading a book. If you're reading a book, you get general description of the story or the characters from the author, but the images you create in your head for the characters in the book are all uniquely yours, right? You can be much more creative. So, you know, from my perspective, as a blind person, my life is more narrative-based, right? Everything is given in sounds and stories, and that's what I'm used to. That's my norm, that's my reality. Whereas sighted people, for sighted people, life is more like a movie, right? It's the story is more based on visuals, more colors and images. But the question is, who's to judge which one's better? Right? So we all are different from each other in one way or another. And I think that is the beauty of life, because we experience it differently, and that allows for creativity and innovation. And so instead of focusing on we might be missing out or who's better, who has more challenges, if we simply look at disability not as a, let's say, not as a problem to be solved, but maybe as a way to experience the world, just a different way to experience the world, then perhaps we will have better solutions for many of the access problems we have. Put it this way, what if, let's say, we had a box of puzzles where all the pieces were the same size, same color, you know, same shape. Assembling that puzzle picture would probably be easy, but the picture, the resulting picture would not be all that interesting. It would probably just be a larger version of what the individual pieces are, right? But on the other hand, if, let's say, we had another box of puzzle pieces, where all the pieces were different colors, different shapes, different sizes, it would certainly be harder to put together the puzzle. It would require more time and patience. But on the other hand, the resulting picture would be much more interesting, right? Much more worthwhile. And also, you would probably get a better sense of satisfaction for having completed a challenging puzzle. And so the point is that barriers create lack of access. Lack of access may result in reduced ability, and reduced access can result in disability. And disability is not so much an inability to do something as much as it is lack of access. I hope that answers your question, Rina.
Thank you. And Uyanga-san, can you tell us about different types of barriers that
ありが
exist?
とうございます。
Can it be
いろいろバリアの違いがあると思いますけれども、文化的なものや個人的なもの、どういったバリアがあるか教えてください。
Right.
Thank
you. Tenta. Yes, so depending on where we encounter the barriers, there can be physical barriers. For example, lack of slopes, lack of audible signals, lack of tactile paths, or lack of elevators. Or barriers can also be attitudinal, right? So lack of proper awareness or lack of proper legal provision. So barriers, why do barriers exist? Most of us will know that societies are built and designed for the majority that exist in the society, right? And that's because the majority tend to have more representation in power, positions of power, in decision making. And therefore, their voices, their needs are better represented in decision making levels. And so, can you imagine, for example, what if let's say 70% of Tokyo's population was guide dog users or wheelchair users? Things might look different. Barriers, and a lot of people bring up the point of, that's only natural, right? So efficiency is what we look for, and that's that's how societies are designed and built. But then on the other hand, if we think about where barriers come from, again, we go back to perspective, because barriers generally arise when we make decisions, when we make assumptions, or when we make judgment about other people's reality. In other words, other people's needs and wants or abilities or disabilities based on our reality. In other words, based on what we think or know is true or regard as normal. And that's when barriers arise, because we are making assumptions, right? So an important thing to remember is that barriers is not so much about the disability as they are about what society views, what society regards as ability. So, for example, the majority in power makes an assumption about what, let's say, a minority group needs or wants without having consulted them. And they determine where they should be or what their role should be in society. So that would be an uninformed decision, which is an assumption, right? So let me give you, and that creates a barrier. So let me give you an example. When I started working in Mongolia, the social welfare law we had in Mongolia at the time said that a person like me, who is blind in both eyes, were 100% unemployable. And so according to Mongolian law, I was not employable. It was, I legally, I was not supposed to work, and I was not supposed to pay taxes. But I was paying taxes and I was working. So the assumption, that law was made on the assumption that I cannot work. So that creates, so that blocks, right? That blocks my access to work, to show society what I'm capable of. And that also further prevents me from finding out what I'm capable of. So that kind of uninformed assumptions create barriers that are much more debilitating and dangerous and long-lasting for both the society and the people with disability. So essentially, access to communication, being able to get your voices heard in decision-making levels, is key to removing barriers. It's key to creating access or creating an environment where multiple needs can be served, where we can be inclusive. Another example I would like to use, it might seem overly simplistic, but it might give you a better picture. Imagine you're a tourist in a foreign country where you don't speak the language and you don't have the technology to translate. And imagine yourself trying to communicate, trying to express yourself without knowing the language, right? You are a completely capable adult, but you lack the ability to communicate with them. So whatever restaurant you try to go to, activity you try to participate in, it's very hard for you to express yourself. You try body language, maybe you try sign language, or maybe you try drawing it on a paper. You know, you may look not very intelligent, You may get frustrated, so you may decide, maybe it's too exhausting. I'll just stay in my room, and you might not do all the things you had planned to. Many times it's like that for people with disabilities. Even though they have the ability, even though they have the desire, sometimes they just get tired of trying and meeting barriers every step of the way. But then, using the same example, think about the tourist. Fixing that tourist's problem is so easy, right? Only if she had maybe a hotel concierge who spoke her language, or a translation device or a phone app that she could have used. Then she could have participated, she could have communicated. So in a way, that's a form of access. And so without having that translation device, that person is debilitated, right? That person is disabled, in other words. But as soon as that person has that access, she is able to fully participate. And that's what I mean when I say lack of access creates disability. It's not so much that because I'm blind, I cannot work. It's because I don't have the proper tools or access to what I need that I'm not able to fully participate. And so that's an important shift in attitude that we need to remember. So again, using the puzzle analogy, remember how I said earlier, we create barriers by judging or making assumptions about other people's needs and realities based on what we believe in or what we know is true for us, right? So that is the same as trying to fit, let's say you had a square shape, right? A puzzle piece that was shaped like a square, and you're trying to put it in a round hole. They will not fit because but that doesn't mean there is another square hole somewhere else where that shape can fit and serve a purpose. So I hope that answers the question, Tenta.
Thank you. So we have talked about the barriers we face in our lives. Is the barrier always negative? Or can there be a positive aspect to it?
Rina-san, that's a great question. I absolutely think there is a positive side to barriers. As I said earlier, many things in life are a matter of perception. In other words, how you look at things determine what you do with them. And barriers are the same. So I think we would all agree that if we have the choice, we'd much rather not have barriers in our life, right? As much as it is so much fun for me to be able to bring my dog on an airplane as a disabled person, if I have the option, I think I would much rather be able to see. I want to be able to go shopping by myself. I want to be able to walk around Tokyo with my 4-year-old son, just the two of us. I want to be able to drive a car. I want to be able to enjoy the scenery when we are traveling on Shinkansen in beautiful Japan. But I don't have that option. I don't have the I don't have control over what life might bring me. But the important thing to remember is I have the power to decide how to respond to them, to the life's challenges, right? So, I think it is important to remember that, challenges, barriers and challenges will arise in life. They will make life harder, maybe. But one thing I think we will all agree, and this might sound a little bit cliche, but I think the barriers, as difficult as they were, helped make me stronger. It helped make me more confident person. So, when we talk about what people with disabilities can do or can't do, a phrase that I always hear is let's be realistic. But being realistic might be a little more challenging than we think, because as I explained earlier, everybody's reality is different, right? Let me give you an example. When I went to study in the United States, I had never walked by myself anywhere alone. I didn't know how to use a computer. I didn't know how to walk with a cane, or I didn't know how to use a guide dog. So I think it was maybe realistic to the people to think that, to people in the US to think that I cannot make it. Maybe it was realistic for them to assume that I cannot go from not being able to go to the bathroom on my own to becoming able to navigate a campus of 30,000 on my own. Or maybe it was realistic for them to assume that, I cannot go from not being able to check my email to becoming proficient in using screen reading software and using computers, right? So, but on the other hand, where I'm coming from, my reality is very different than those people's, because I come from, I come from a background where when I started learning English, I didn't have any Braille paper to write on. Sometimes I had to use toothpaste, containers to write things on. I didn't have enough paper. I didn't have any books in English. I didn't have teachers who were trained to teach English. So I taught my 9-year-old younger sister the English alphabet. And so she was spelling words one letter at a time to me, and that's how I started learning English. And so, in my opinion, I should be able to do all of those things, because it's not because I'm superhuman or super smart. It's just because I am used to working hard with less resources, right? That's my reality. That's where I come from. So, your attitude or how you look at barriers determines what you make out of it, right? So of course, as challenging as those barriers were for me, they helped me to become more resilient and more confident person. They formed who I ended up becoming. Now, this is not to say that having barriers always make you stronger. If it wasn't for my family or my friends, many of those barriers probably would have crushed my spirit. Probably I might have given up. But when I'm going through a challenging time or when I'm having barriers, I always remind myself that I am not the only person who's having challenges, who's having barriers. And so for us to change our perspective on what a barrier is, I think an important fact to remember is that barriers or challenges in life is a shared experience. It's a universal thing. Because we're humans, we live a life of challenges and we struggle. All of us have our fair share of problems. I mean, we have it to different degrees and in different ways, but we all have it. And when we remember that, when we remember that barrier is a shared human experience, I think that would give us more empathy towards each other. We remember that when maybe we approach life with more patience and understanding rather than judgment or fear or discomfort, right? We start to understand that no matter how different we feel or look or think, there's always a spot for each of us in the puzzle. And I think in order to create an inclusive society or to have an inclusive mindset, what we need to remember, or what our job or our role is to contribute to finding the spot in the puzzle where each of the puzzle pieces can fit and where they can serve a purpose, right? So, and I think the source for that understanding and that patience and that empathy, patience comes from the knowledge that we all face barriers, and that and even as I said earlier, even as we lack the power to control what life might throw at us, we have the power to choose to be empathetic towards each other. And that empathy in turn hopefully creates better communication, and better communication in turn creates better access. So I would like to, I might be finishing a little bit early, but I would like to end with a quote that I think is a good summary of what we can do. So the quote goes, start by doing what's necessary, then do what's possible. And suddenly you will be doing the impossible. I'm welcome to elaborate on many of the, I'm happy to elaborate on some of the points I talked about, but those are the main ideas or points I wanted to cover.
Uyanga-san, thank you so much for sharing your interesting
ム
experience.
ガさん、ご自身の経験いろいろお話しいただきありがとうございました。I often feel inconvenienced living in this society. Walking places I'm unfamiliar is not easy for me. And reading normal printed book is not easy either. But with the technology and relying on people, I can go wherever I want to. That is the power that I have. And I can also help others as well. Because I like talking with people, I can facilitate discussions, or I can also share my opinions too. I'm in the a cappella club, and because I have more experience, I can teach the freshmen in the club that I belong to. And I think it's a good thing that we have different people in the society where we can help each other. And accepting those people is not easy, but I think it's very important thing. Tenta-san, what do you think? Have you had such experience yourself? Well, until I told you earlier, I run a kitchen car with people with disability, and that experience, and until I started that activity, I didn't really have a chance to learn about the current situation of people with disability. And working together with them, and working with the farming and selling, harvesting and selling vegetables, I understand that we all have different strong points and weak points, and that's the only difference between people with disability or not. Like when I do kitchen car, some people are good at decorating, but they're not really good at customer service. But another person will be good at customer service, but they are not really good at decorating the food. So we all have different strong points and weak points. And when I speak to them more in detail, like Rina mentioned, many people feel uncomfortable feeling barriers with them. Today, every day, we now take many things for granted, but there are people living with hard time, and I think it's really important for us to understand that situation. And even if a few people within the group can start to see the current situation as their own and want to change it, if those people increase, and I think the society will change little by little. Thank you. So for those participating in this session, what do you think about hearing Ms. Uyanga's and our stories? For the next few minutes, you'll be dividing into small groups. So please discuss in your group about your experiences or about the current situation. So I look forward to seeing you in 50 minutes.
So welcome back, you all.
皆さん、小グループでのディスカッションはいか
How
がでした
was the
か
breakout
で
discussion
は、最初
in
のグルー
small
プの
groups?
雄大くん、
So,
どんな意見が
Yudai-kun,
出たか
can
教
you
えていた
tell
だ
us
けます
what
か
was discussed in your own group?
僕の
Thank you.
グループでは、
So in our group,
一つ、ウヨンさんという方がシェアしてくれた
a
エピソー
person
ドなん
named
ですけども、
Uyon-san. He or she
日
shared
本語で大丈夫ですか？
discussion with us.
大丈夫です。
はい。
はい。
He or she told us about his or her experience.
目が、見えない方と一
ウヨンさん
緒に、
was
お友達と歩いていた際 に、
walking with a friend who
初めて
is
歩く道で、
visually
そこで
disabled, and
そ
this
の
was the
方
first
が
street, the first time they were
この道
walking on the
この
road
生き方
on
違う
this
と思う
street.
って
And then this
伝えて、
visually impaired person said
そしたら
that
本当に見
this
てみ
is
た
not
ら
the
本当に違った
right
って
direction.
いう、そ
And
の
he checked
逆
and he
にその
realized
目が
that
見えない方に
he or she was right.
ガイド
So
してくれたって
he
いう
was
エピ
led
ソードだっ
by
たんですけど、
the
それもその
his
ヤンガさ
directions
ん
were
がおっしゃって
corrected
い
by the
た
visually
そ
impaired
の
person.
ブライン
So
ド
Uyanga-san
の
mentioned
人たち
earlier
は
that
まあ
visually
道わから
impaired
ないだろ
person,
うっていう
people
そう
would
いうアサ
assume
ンプション
that
そういうこう
there would be an
仮定をして
assumption
まあ
that people would
していたっていう
hypothesize, okay, visually impaired people would not know the directions or how to choose the right
その
streets.
不動産を
So
探してる
that
時
was
とか
corrected.
あ
And
と
when looking for
自
real
分
estates
ご
or
自分が
nice apartment house,
一人いらっしゃったのがその膝を
there
怪
was
我
this
され
one
た時
student
に
when
その
the knee was
エレベーターがない
injured and there
駅
was
であったりとかそういう施設が
station,
多すぎ
train
て
station,
もうす
too
ご
many
く
facilities
もう
that doesn't have any
登った
elevators.
みたいな
So
すご
he
く
had
大変だ
to,
った
he or
って
she
いう
had to climb
エピ
the
ソードがあっ
stairs
て
as if they were
僕個
crawling,
人
he
的
was
な意
crawling
見と
up
して
the
は
stairs.
な
So
んか本当
personally,
に怪我してい
I
つ
felt that
障害が
we could all be injured and one day we could
あ
be
る方になるの
physically
かわから
disabled.
ないので
We never know.
こう
And
自分が怪我した時とかそういう時
when
に
I'm
こう
injured,
あこんなにエレベーターないんだとか
you
なんか
only, you
そ
don't
ういう
realize
こと
that
に
there are many buildings that do not have elevators,
こ
and
こを変えなきゃいけないなって
then
い
you
う
don't, unless these things happen, you don't realize. So then you realize that, oh, these things have to
まあ
be
なん
corrected
ていうんだ
or have to
こ
be
う気づくっ
improved.
ていうのがとても重要だなっていうふうに
Being able
思いま
to
した。
be aware of such
以上
things
です
is important. Thank you.
すいま
That's
せん
all
まとまって
from
なくて
group one.
いえいえ、
Sorry,
雄
I
大くん
was
ありがとうございます。
kind of
では次
scattered.
のグループのミクさん、お願いします。
Mik-san, who represents the second group, can I give the floor to you?
はい。これカメラ出した方がいいですか？
Should I show my face on the
可能なら。
If possible, please
あで
show
も
us
そうであれば
your
はい
face.
電波の兼ね合いもあると思うので。
全然
If it-
大丈夫なんですけど、
ありがとう
This
ご
is
ざいます。
Miku.
私たちのグループでは、
In our
い
group,
ろいろその 障害の方々の現状
people
とかっていう
with
ものを知ることが
disabilities,
すごく大切っていう
it's important to know their actual
結論が出
conditions.
たんですけど、
And that
なんか
was
そ
one
の
of
理
the
由としては、
points that was
私のグループ
reviewed.
の方
The
がおっしゃって
reason
たんです
is
けど、
somebody in my group
小
said
学
that
校の頃か
in
らその
the elementary
手話
school,
ってい
since
うものを
the elementary school,
手話を
this person was
小さい頃から習っていたか
learning
ら、
sign language since
障
his or
害
her
者の方
childhood.
々に対し
And
てどういう社会が
he,
社会がどういう、反応してい
this
るか
person
とか
understood
いうものを
how
学べたり、
the
私も
society
大学
responds to
で
people with
社会
disabilities.
手話の社
And
会言語学ってい
in
う、授
in
業を
the
取っているんですけ
university,
ど、
I
そ
am
こで
taking
も、
the course
教
of
授自身が
sign languages sociology,
耳が聞こえなかっ
and
た
the
り、
professor is
TA の方
audially
も耳
impaired,
が聞こえ
and
ない状
our
態
teachers,
で、
teaching assistants is audily
通訳の
impaired.
方が
So
入っ
we
て
have a
授業
sign language
授
person
業をしてる
who
っていう形なんですけど
communicates,
も、そこでやっぱり
who
私
runs the
は
class along with the
TA の方
professors and
も
the TA.
実際、
And the
生徒さん
TA
で、
person is a
私はそ
student
のどう授
himself,
業を受けているの
and
か、私が授業を受
how
けて
I
いる
am
時はいつ
taking
も
classes.
教授の話を
When I'm
聞いた
taking
り、
classes,
オ
I'm
ンライ
trying
ン
to
授業で
listen
も
to what the
こ
professor
う
says.
読
And
んだりっ
online
ていうこと
class,
がほとんどなので、
I read
そういう
the
授業
materials
形態
in
の中
advance.
でどうやって
And in such a
授業
form
してい
of
るのかっていうことが
classes,
全くわからなかったので、
how
それ
the
聞いてみたん
classes
ですけど、
are
そしたら
organized,
その
I didn't know
今で
how
は大
she was
学に、
managing that.
こう
But
ボラ
now,
ンティアさんっていう
currently,
ボラ
the
ンティアさんが
volunteer
いて、
people come to the
授業
university,
の内容を
and
全て
the
こう、
classes,
書いてく
the
れて、
contents of the classes will be
それを
written
読ん
down
で
on the
授
notes,
業を、
and
受けてるっていうことが
the TA
おっしゃって
reads
たので、
those
やっぱり
braille
昔に
notes
比べて
and
今
to
は
take the
なん
class.
か
So compared to the
すご
past,
く
I think
障害者の方も
that
少しずつではあるんですけ
people
ど、
with
生き
disabilities
やすくなってる社会に
gradually
なっているのではないかなと。
maybe
で、
is
そういう
finding
ことで、
society to be
なんか
more
私たちも、
acceptable,
知ら
more
ないこと
accepting of
っていうもの
the
がす
people
ごく
with
たくさんあ
disabilities.
るので、
And there are so
なんか
many
こう
things
いう
that we do not
覚
know
えて
in
い
the
くことがす
society.
ごく大切
So
で、先ほど、
acquiring such
お
knowledge
話
is
の
very
中でもおっしゃっ
important.
てたように、
And
モ
Uyanga-san
ンゴ
mentioned
リア
earlier
で、
that
法律
in
でその
Mongolia,
目の見え
there's
ない
a
方は
law
仕事が
that
ないっていうか、
visually
まあ、仕事を持
impaired
ってない
people
っていう現状
are
が
not
現状っていう
supposed
か
to
昔ですけどあっ
is
たみたい
less
な話だったと
employable,
思うんで
was
すけど、
regarded as less
そういうことも
employable
少
in the
なから
past.
ず今でも
But
日本で
I think
日本だったり
that
海
is
外だっ
still
たり
happening
そのところで、
universally
まあ、まだ残っ
and
てい
in
る
Japan
こ
as
ともあ
well,
るとは思うので、
that
そういうことに
these
対して
people
も
are
私
deemed
たちが
unemployable.
い
And
ろんなことを知って社会を
I should
少
know
し
more
ずつで
things.
も
We should
変え
know
てい
more
くこと
things
ができた
so
ら
that we can change the
いい
society
のかなって
even
いう
little by little, step by
理
step.
論があり
And
ま
that
し
was
た。
the discussion
以上
that
です。
went on amongst us. That's all
さんあ
from
り
the
がとう
group
ござい
2.
ます。
Miku-san, thank you so
では次
much.
のグループ、カリーナさん、お願いしま
Okay,
す。
Karina-san, who represents group 3.
こんにちは、カリーナ
This
で
is
す。
Karina.
はい、私のグループで話したこと
In
で
my
す
group,
ね。まず
it
皆
was
さん、
discussed that
バリアのことや、あ
we
と
discussed
障害を持った
on
方たちとどのよ
barriers
うな
and
経験を持っ
what
てい
kind
る
of
かシェアしたんで
experiences
す
we
けど、
have as
その後に結局
as
た
we
どり
mingled
着い
with
た
the
結
people with
論というか最
disabilities.
後の方に話した
And
こと
what we
が、
discussed as
どうや
almost
って
coming to the conclusion was,
障害を持っている方と持ってない方の間のバリ
so
アをどう
how
やって
do
崩
we
していけるか。
remove the barrier between
それが
the
多分結
people with
局
disabilities
つ
and
なが
without
るのがその
disabilities?
インクルーシビティというか
And
みんな
inclusivity could be the
こうやっ
bridge.
て同じ空間の中でみんなで過ごせるように
To
なってい
spend
く
time
こと
together
が
in the same
いいん
space,
じゃない
to
かっ
be
ていう
able to
話を
spend
し
time
ていた
together
ん
in
ですけ
this
ど、
same space
なぜ
would
それ
be
が重要かという
desirable.
と
And why is that important? Because
誰かも話された方
somebody
だった
else
と思うんですけど、
has
日本の
mentioned
小学
earlier,
校とかだとやっぱ
in
り障
Japanese
害を持って
elementary
いる方
school,
と持ってない
people with
方で
disabilities
教室が
and
分かれたり、クラス
people
が分
without
かれていたり
disabilities
すると、
will study in
もうその
different
時点
classrooms
で
or
境
even
目
different
がで
schools.
きてしま
And
っ
then
て、
there's a border there. There's
障害を持って
a
ない方た
separation
ちは
there.
障害を持
People
っている
without
方たち
disabilities
ができることできないことすらも
will
あ
not
ま
know
り
what the people with
自
disabilities
覚する
can
こ
do
と
or
ができ
cannot
ないじゃ
do.
ないで
They
すか。
cannot learn from each
例えば
other.
もし
if they sit together in the same space, in the same classroom, spend time together, then they can find out, oh, this is his strength, this is her weakness. But we are all separated from the beginning. Then there is no chance for us to get to mingle and know each other. So one idea is could be
システムの中で、
So within the
同
education
じクラス
system,
でもうちょっと関わり合えたり、
within if they were placed in the same class, then
少しバリアが
these two
崩れた
groups
り、お互い
can remove the barrier gradually or be able to mutually understand each other.
ありがとうございます。
Thank
で
you.
は次のグループはミカさん、
So
お願
Mika,
いします。
can I give the floor to you?
ミカです。
This is Mika. Thank you for a wonderful discussion and thank you for nice presentation. In my group, how we look at things, how we look at the society was discussed.
大切になっていると感じてい
Is
て、
becoming more and
特
more
に
important,
障害を持っていない
especially
人が
the people without the disability,
なってますか？障害を持っていない人が障害を持っている人の視点を
to be able to learn the perspectives of people with disabilities is important. That was what we learned. In my
建
group,
築について学んでいる方が
there
い
are
て、
people who are
その方は
learning about
設計
architecture,
をする上で
and
バリアフ
as
リ
we
ーなどについ
plan,
て
as they
考えることはあ
plan
るん
for
ですけど、
buildings,
人が
they
人に
think
対して
about
思いや
barrier
りを持
free
つ、
and
その気持ちが
to
大切
have
だとい
compassion
う
to
こ
others
とを今回
is
学んだという意
is
見が出ました。
important.
あとまた、
He learned in this session, he
ユアン
said.
ガさん
And
ウ
Uyanga-san,
ヤンガさん
Uyanga-san, sorry,
が20歳頃
when she was
に視
20
力を
years
失っ
old,
たっていう
she
話を聞い
lost her
て、
sight
押しつぶされなかったこととか、
and she
見え
wasn't
ないという
crushed
状
by
況
this
をポジティブ
difficulty.
に捉え
And
ている。 さっ
took,
き出た話で言う
she
と、
embraced this
ドラマとか
not being able to
を
see
見
as
るときに
positively.
頭で
And
想
when
像しな
she's
がら
watching movies,
見ることによっ
she
て
conjures up
もっと
images
ユニークな発想
and
ができ
she
ると
can
か、そういう
be
の
even
を
more creative and have
そ
more
ういう考
unique
え方を持つことによ
thoughts.
って、
And
実際
by
見えない方がい
being
いのか見
thinking
える方がいいの
positively,
かっていうの
whether
を
being
ど
able
っ
to
ちがいい
see
かって結
or
局は
not being
試せばいい
able
よ
to
ねって
see
いう
which is
話な
better,
どに
we can
感銘
never
を受けたって
decide.
いう意見なども
And
出て
and
ます。
people were impressed by her ideas. Thank you.
ありがとうございます。では最後のグループとなりました。かなこさん、お願いいたします。
So our final speaker, Kanako-san, please.
Please, the last group.
はい、はじめまして、
No.
大石かなこです。
My name is Kanako Oishi.
私たちのグループで
In my
話したのは、
group, what we talked about
アメ
is
リカと日本における
US and
バリア
Japan.
の違いっていう
There's
と
a
ころから
barrier
始め
between
ました。私たちのグループの中にワシ
there.
ントンに
In
今
there's
住
a
んでいる子
person
がい
who
たっ
was
ていうこともあ
who's
っ
a
て、
person
で
living in
彼女
Washington
が
right now. What she
ア
said
メリ
is
カで
that
は日
in
本に比べる
US
と、特に
compared to
ワシントンの
Japan
日
or
本に比べる
compared
と
to
バリア
Washington,
がもっとないんじゃないかという
there
話
is
を
less
して
barrier.
していて、
That's what she
で例え
mentioned.
ば
For
信号
example,
のスパン
like
が
a
日本に
traffic
比べ
light,
たら長かった
the
り、
span that light
あとは
is longer,
大
easier for it to
学と
walk.
かでも
And in university
障
campus,
害を持った方
people
が、
with
実際学生さ
disability,
んにもっといたりと
there are
か、
more students with people
教
with
員として
disabilities,
働かれていたり
and
と
there
か、
are staff
そういう、
and
まあ
professor
もっとインクル
faculty.
ーシブな環境があるに比
People,
べて、
there are a
まあ
lot
日
of
本だ
faculty
と、
with
まあ私が通
disability
ってた大
and
学とかではあまりそも
compared
そも
to
障害
campus in
者を見
Japan,
かけない。
I don't see
まあ
many
学
people
生
with
であった
disability
り、
in
教員であっ
campus
た
or
り、
whether
あ
it's a
まり
student
そも
or
そも見かけない
faculty.
っていうのが現
So we
状
just don't
で、
see these
で、まあそういった
people
ところ
in
からアメリカ
in
と日
our
本
campus in Japan.
だ
So
と、
I
ま
think
あ
there
バ
is
リ
a
ア
lot of
が
difference or a
結構
barrier
まあ日本の
between
方がバリ
US
アがあ
and
るのか
Japan.
なっていう
I
話をしまし
feel
た。
there's more
で、
barrier in
ま
Japan
あ
compared to US.
そこからやっぱり日本でなん
And
でこう
from
いう
that
バリアがあ
point,
るのかなって考えたときに、
we talk about why there's barrier in Japan.
がお話しされていた通
Like
り、
Uyanga
コミュニケー
said,
ション
Uyanga-san
が足りてない
said,
のかな
I
っていう
think there is
ところで、
not enough
uyanga さ
communication.
んがコミュニケーションがその
And
key to creating
Uyanga-san
access で
said
key to preventing
that
barriers とおっしゃってたと思うんですけ
said
ど、
that that is the
あ
key
本当
to
にその
the
通りだなと思って、
removing the barrier, and
日
I
本でも
really
もっと
believe that is so.
より良いコミュ
And
ニケーション
I
が障害
think
者の
it's
方と健
important
常者
for
の方
us
で
in Japan
あ
to
れ
have
ば、
more communication
もっとイン
between
クルーシブな
disability, people with disability and people with
社会が作れるんじゃない
non-disability,
かなと
and
思
we
って
can
い
make
て、
a more inclusive
で、なので、
society by having
こ
those
ういった今回み
communication.
たいな
And
学生も多く参加できるような
in this kind
こう
of
いった
session
障害者の
with
方とか
communication or
らお
this
話を聞け
session or
る機
workshop,
会を
having the students
設
and
けてく
people
だ
with
さったことにすごい
disability to have this
感
kind of
謝していま
session
す。で、
is
本当によりこういった
I'm
オ
very
ポチュニティ
thankful
があれ
for
ば
this opportunity,
もっ
and
とコミュニケーションがこれか
and
ら
with this
スムー
kind
ズ
of
に取れて、もっとイン
opportunity
クルー
will
シブ
give
な
us
社会
more chances to
を
have
作れ
communication
る
with
んじゃない
different
かなという
people,
ふうに
and we
思い
can
まし
make
た。すいま
help
せ
in
ん、ちょっ
making
と
an
うま
inclusive
く
society.
伝えられたかわからないです。
I hope I was able to convey my message.
以上で
Thank
す。
you. Thank you very much.
Uyanga-san, do you have any comments or thoughts after listening to our group
今の
discussion?
ディスカッションの方の意見を聞いて何かご意見、
Sure. Yeah,
反省
it
聞
was
かせてください。はい。
great to
もちろ
listen
ん
to everybody's
皆さんの
ideas,
お話聞かせ
and
てすごく
I'm
嬉し
so
い
glad
で
that there was such a insightful discussion that
す。す
took
ごい
place in
い
the
いそ
different
のい
groups.
わゆる
And I agree
communication
with all the
だったところを
ideas,
聞けてよかったで
observations
す。
from the different groups.
で
And
他の方
as the
々のグル
last
ープ
group
の
indicated that
最後のグループの方がおっしゃっ
communication
たの
really is
は
the key
コミュニケーション本当
to
に鍵
removing
であっ
barriers,
て
to
それが
understanding each
バ
other.
リアを
And
取
I
り除
think
くのにす
real
ごい重要な鍵とな
communication
っています。
that
そのコミュニケ
really
ーションがで
changes
すね、
people's perspective happens
人の考え
when
方を変え
we are
て、
able to
観点を
interact
変え
each
て、
other
より
on
総
daily
合的
basis.
に、はい、お互いに接
These
するこ
types
と
of
ができます。
discussions and
こう
talks
いっ
are
たディ
very
スカッショ
important.
ン
It
や
allows us to
あ
start
の会話
thinking
というのは非
differently,
常
right?
に重要なことで、
Like Pablo Picasso said,
パ
it
ブロ・
helps
ピ
us
カ
to
ソが
start
言ったみ
seeing
たい
things
に、
from other people's perspective.
他の人
But
た
on
ち
the
が
other
出す
hand,
観点、見方をですね、
in
学ぶこ
order
とが
to
できるんで
change
す
your
ね。
mindsets,
で、
lasting
考え方を
connection,
変えるためには、
we need to be
本
able
当
to
のつなが
interact
り合
on
いを
daily
作るために
basis.
は、つながりを
And
する
that
ため
could
には、
mean, like we mentioned,
もう日
universities,
々の
right?
レベ
Where
ルで
we
ですね、
study
交
together,
流が必要
schools
で
where
す。
we study together,
例えば大学ですね。
and employment
学校もそ
where
うで
we
す。一緒
work
に学ん
together.
で、一緒に生活するような
And
とこ
when
ろ。
we interact on
雇
daily
用もそうで
basis,
す。働
we
く場面
find
でも
out
そうで
that
す。で、こ
people
うい
with
った毎日
disabilities
の
or
レベル
any
で
other
があ
person
ること
really,
で、
we are just same people.
で、
We are
障
the
害ある
same.
なしに関
We
係な
just
くですね、
experience the
我々はみんな
world
同
in
じ人な
different
んです。
ways.
同じ
Maybe it doesn't mean because I'm
違
blind,
う
it
私も
doesn't
いろん
mean
なことを
I'm
経験している
better
の
or
で、
worse than anybody
そ
else.
の
It
目が
just
見えない
means
し、視覚
I'm
障害者
different
だと言って
and
です
I
ね、劣っているわけではありません。
the way I perceive
ただ
things
私
is
は皆さ
different,
んと違うだけです。
right? The way I experience the
で、
world
私が
when
見る
somebody
見
says a
方が違うだ
sunset,
けです。
to me, what
経
I
験す
picture
る
in
こと
my
が違
head
う。
will be different than everybody else's,
で、
right? So
私が
um,
皆さんが経
what
験
we
することと私が
value,
思い描くこと
if
は想像することが違
as
うだ
for
け
example, I
で
can
す。
only speak
何を
for
価値
myself
を
as a
思い出
blind
すの
person. For
か。
example, if
例え
sighted
ば、
people
私のことしか
sometimes they
障
rely
害
too
者の
much
観
on
点しかから
visuals.
話せません
I
が、
think it almost becomes a
多く
limitation
の方はで
or
すね、やっぱり視
restriction
覚に
for
すご
them,
く頼
right?
って
So
いる
in
ような
my
ところがあっ
opinion,
て、
life
で
is
それ
so
が逆に
rich
制限を教える
and
こと
we
に
have
なって
different
しまうんです
senses.
ね。
So
私
if we
にとって
rely
は
on
で
one
すね、
sense too much,
みんなそれぞれ五
we
感
might
が変わってい
become
ます。
limited.
なの
We
で一
might
つ
be
のい
missing
わゆ
out.
るそのセンス、その
Instead
五
of
感の
looking
一
at
つにで
people's
すね、対
disabilities
立
and
的に
thinking,
見ると
poor
ですね、
them,
他の
maybe you
感
can
性
think,
がです
I
ね、
wonder what I'm missing out.
感
I
じ取れ
wonder
ない。
how that person's, what
そう
that
いうことがあ
person's
るんじゃない
world
で
is
しょうか。
like, right?
そういう
So
人が、そう、私はこう思う
I
けど、あの
am
人はどう思うんだ
very
ろうって
grateful
いう
for
よう
Hands
な、
on
そういった
Tokyo and
想
Lives
像
Project for
がかけてし
giving
まうん
me
で
this
すね。
opportunity to talk with you
で、
guys
ダイス
today.
プロジェク
And
ト
thank
に
you for
参加で
all
きた
of
こ
the
とを非常に
attendees
嬉しく思います。で、
for
今
making
回このよ
time
うなチャンスをい
at
ただ
this
きまし
late
たこと、
hour to join us today
大変
and
嬉しく思いま
participate in
す。
our
夜
discussion.
遅くまで、
Yeah,
はい、参加いただきまして、心から
I
感謝
would
いたし
have
ます。
loved to stay and talk with you more, but I think we might be running out
も
of
っともっ
time,
とですね、一緒に
unfortunately.
皆さんとお話したいところなんですけれども、ちょっと時間がなくなってしまいましたので、はい。
Thank you, Uyanga-san, for a wonderful presentation about barriers tonight and
そ
wonderful
う素晴ら
comments.
しいプレゼンテー
We
ション
have
皆さん
learned
あり
so
がとうご
much
ざい
in
ま
a
した。
short amount of time today.
はい。すごい短時間で
ウヤンガさん、今日は本当にありがとうございました。皆さん、最後にウヤンガさんに画面越し
Uyanga-san,
に
thank
拍
you
手を
so
お願いいた
much.
しま
Please
す。
give Uyanga-san a round of applause through the screen. Thank you.
さて、次回のウェビナーシリーズ。
Here's the announcement for the second session of our webinar series.
第2回目は7
Our
月
next session is scheduled on Thursday, July 8th. Mr. Mark Bookman is the guest speaker. Mark has acquired
客員教授として
his PhD in East Asian languages and civilization from the University of Pennsylvania. And from coming June, he will be serving as a visiting researcher at University of Tokyo Research Center for Advanced Science and Technology. He is an expert expert in the history of disability policy and social movement in Japan over the past 100 years, and also works as a accessibility consultant. Today, Uyanga-san shared us with about barriers that we face. Now our challenge is how to confront with these barriers. We look forward to hearing Mark-san's expert opinion and talking about his issue with you all again. Thank you very much for joining us tonight
また次回お会いするのを
and
楽
hope
しみに
seeing
してい
you
ます。
next time.
ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much.
バイ
Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
バイバイ。